She cheated on me, so I went ahead and slept with all her friends. When my girlfriend cheated, I made sure she would never forget it. Even now, a good revenge story gives me a strange, warm sense of satisfaction. I'm pretty sure it all started with this experience back in college when I got back at my cheating girlfriend, and it felt unbelievably good. I know I shouldn't feel proud of it, but the truth is, it was incredibly gratifying. I'm almost embarrassed to admit how much I enjoyed it. It's one of those memories that stick with you, even though you wish it didn't. This is why I've decided to write this post. It's a story I don't share often because it's so long, messy, and honestly, doesn't paint me in the best light. That said, I'm going to do my best to tell this story fairly, without twisting things to make her look like the villain or me like the innocent victim. This is the unfiltered version, even if it makes me look bad. A little context and backstory. At the time, I was playing Division I NCAA basketball at Northville State University. My schedule was crazy, with constant travel to different cities and states every week, and my entire life revolved around the sport. Looking back, this was also when I started to develop a nasty habit with alcohol and other substances, something that would take years to fix. Eventually, I did get clean. I joined one of those programs you can find listed in the front of any phone book. If anyone reading this is in recovery, you'll understand how we addicts can spiral, and this story is just one example of how those character flaws can play out. But to be clear, I'm not sharing this for sympathy or self-pity. Here's the thing, I wasn't always this way. As a kid, I was a good, well-meaning person, even though I had a tough upbringing. Despite the challenges, I managed to hold on to a decent sense of kindness toward others and usually chose the right path, even when it wasn't easy. When it came to relationships, I knew cheating happened, but I never thought it would happen to me. I figured it was something other people dealt with, not me. Back then, I thought being the ultimate, good boyfriend, and choosing great women would protect me from infidelity. I was so naive. I thought way too highly of myself, and like most guys in their early 20s, I had an ego bigger than the moon. At the time, I was a junior in college, fresh out of a 3-year relationship with my high school girlfriend. We'd broken up about a year before, and I considered it my learning experience. I figured that relationship had taught me everything I needed to know, and now I was ready to find the woman I'd probably end up marrying. Yeah, I know, it sounds ridiculous now. I was young, dumb, and thought I had it all figured out. Looking back, I can only laugh at myself. That's when I noticed Megan. She was one of the top sprinters on the track team, and I would see her around the athletic facility at school. The training grounds and locker rooms were like a second home for the university's teams, so we crossed paths a lot. Megan wasn't just good, she was incredible. The athletic teams often threw parties, and I knew I'd eventually see her at one of them. That would be my chance to introduce myself, chat her up, and see where things might go. Sure enough, I spotted Megan at one of those parties a few weeks later. We passed each other on the stairs, made eye contact, and she gave me this smile that made my heart race. I struck up a conversation, and before I knew it, we were exchanging numbers. From there, we started the classic back and forth of American flirting. We'd text each other constantly, dropping hints that we were into one another while still pretending to play it cool. It went on like this for weeks, with both of us circling around the obvious without fully committing. At the time, Megan was on a break, with her boyfriend, a linebacker on the football team. Eventually, she left him completely to be with me. I should have seen that as a huge red flag, but my ego didn't let me. Instead, I thought it was proof of how special I was. Her choosing me over him inflated my confidence even more. I was playing great basketball and riding high. If Megan was willing to leave her ex for me, there was no way she'd ever leave me for someone else. Or so I thought. Looking back, I realize how stupid and arrogant I was. I can't even explain how much I liked her. I was ridiculously attracted to her, almost obsessively. I kept having this surreal feeling of, wow, I can't believe she likes me too. But the truth is, I was so infatuated that I ignored all the warning signs. There were plenty of them, but I was too caught up in my feelings to notice. Our relationship took off at lightning speed. Because of that, I never really paused to reflect on why I was so drawn to her. Fast forward about 8 months, and we were officially a couple. Megan had her own dorm in the athletic housing, but since I was a couple of years older, I had an off-campus apartment that I paid for by working full-time over the summer and part-time during the school year. Megan practically moved in with me, even staying at my place while I was out of town, which was 3 or 4 days a week during the season since my team was constantly traveling for games. Despite the hectic schedule, Megan and I were madly in love, or at least I thought we were. When the basketball season ended, I decided to throw 2 massive parties back-to-back. One was for a teammate's birthday on Friday night, and the other was for my birthday on Saturday. The timing couldn't have been better, with the 2 days lining up perfectly on a Friday and Saturday night. On that Friday night, Megan and I drank way too much and ended up having unprotected sex. Megan used a period tracking app on her phone, and she always recorded whenever that happened so she could keep track of things, especially since she missed periods regularly as an athlete. My drunk self remembered this, and sometime around 5 a.m., that half-drunk, mostly exhausted hour, I decided to remind her to add it to her calendar so we wouldn't forget. I woke her up and said, "Hey, can you put that in your calendar?" Groggily, she unlocked her phone, opened the app, and promptly passed out again before doing anything. Since the phone was already unlocked, I figured I'd just put it in myself and save us the trouble later. Now, here's a side note. Throughout our relationship, Megan was the one who constantly went through my phone and computer. She was extremely insecure and often suspicious. I didn't mind, though, because I had nothing to hide. I wasn't sneaky or shady ever. In hindsight, her behavior should have been a major red flag, but back then, I brushed it off. I trusted her completely and never thought for a second that she'd cheat. This wasn't one of those situations where I went snooping through her phone looking for dirt. I genuinely had no suspicions and was just trying to figure out how to navigate her period tracking app. But as I looked at the calendar, I noticed something odd. There were different colored markers all over it, and out of curiosity, I tapped one to see what the colors meant. Red was for her period, pretty straightforward. Then I saw black markers. They represented times she'd had unprotected sex. That's when my stomach dropped. Her calendar wasn't just sprinkled with black markers, it was absolutely littered with them. It looked like a checkerboard, with way more black spaces than red. And to make matters worse, I noticed black markers on dates when I was out of town for games. Panicking, I started opening each black marker, scrolling through our entire relationship. Megan and I didn't have unprotected sex that often, maybe once or twice a month. But the calendar told a different story. She had meticulously recorded the names of the guys she'd been with in the notes, for each black marker. There were 4 names in total. 4. Throughout the entirety of our relationship, she'd slept with 4 different guys without using protection. Some months were especially bad, nearly a dozen black markers. Some days even had 2. Looking back now, I can't help but wonder if there were more men she didn't bother recording, considering she only noted the ones she didn't use protection with. Most infidelity stories I've heard involve finding incriminating texts, being tipped off by a friend, or walking in on something horrible. But me? I uncovered a neatly organized, perfectly detailed ledger of every time she cheated on me. Of the 4 guys listed, one was her ex, the same guy she'd left to date me. Apparently, hooking up with him was a regular thing. Another was some guy I didn't recognize, but it was clear she'd been with him repeatedly. The other 2 seemed to be one-off situations. But again, this calendar only tracked unprotected encounters, so who knows what else was going on behind the scenes. I sobered up instantly. I picked up Megan's phone again and started scrolling through her texts and call history, hoping for answers. But I found nothing. However, back then, Android phones had a feature that showed deleted texts and calls, though it didn't reveal the actual content of the messages. To my shock, there were thousands of deleted texts and calls. While I couldn't read them, I could see the numbers. Curiosity took over, and I plugged a few of the numbers into Facebook. One matched her ex-boyfriend, and another half-dozen belonged to random guys. The worst part? 2 of the numbers belonged to my teammates. One of them was someone I considered a close friend. I couldn't look at the phone anymore. After a few minutes, I set it down, feeling completely hollow. The sheer amount of evidence overwhelmed me. The more I saw, the more my chest tightened with a mix of anger, humiliation, and heartbreak. It's hard to describe the exact feeling, but I'm sure anyone who's ever caught a partner cheating knows the gut-wrenching pain I'm talking about. I felt like an absolute fool for ever trusting her. Not only had I been completely blind, but I'd also never suspected her of anything. What really started eating away at me was how many times I'd passed up chances to cheat myself, all in the name of being loyal to Megan. I kept replaying those missed opportunities in my head, feeling like an idiot for staying faithful while she did whatever she wanted. My loyalty felt wasted. It's a weird thought, I know, and it doesn't excuse her actions, but in that moment, I couldn't shake the regret. I kept thinking, if I had cheated too, maybe it wouldn't hurt so much. The pain was unbearable. I would have done anything to make it stop, to escape the embarrassment and heartbreak that were suffocating me. Question for anyone reading this: have you ever caught a partner cheating and had similar thoughts? I wonder if it's just me, or if this is how a lot of people feel in the aftermath. I left my apartment to clear my head, aimlessly walking through the streets. My emotions were a complete mess: sadness, anger, humiliation, all swirling around with no outlet. My ego felt shattered, like it had been completely torn apart. I didn't know how to process what I was feeling, and I was way too ashamed to talk to anyone about it. But sadness didn't stay for long. It quickly turned into a burning anger. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew one thing: I was going to get even. I didn't care how, I just needed her to feel the pain she had caused me. Then my roommate and best friend, Dmitri, called. Dmitri, a 7-foot-tall Eastern European basketball player with the most stereotypical Russian demeanor you can imagine, was sleeping on the couch when I left. Despite his towering size and no-nonsense personality, he had a surprisingly goofy name for a guy like him. "Where are you?" he asked when I picked up. I told him what happened and begged him to keep it to himself. I heard him get up, walk into my room, and yell in his thick Russian accent, "Yo, you cheated on him?" In the background, I faintly heard Megan's voice trying to respond before Dmitri cut her off, yelling again, "Get out of the apartment!" There was some muffled scuffling before Dmitri got back on the line. "She's gone," he said calmly. "Come back, and let's talk." I turned around and headed home. When I got there, Dmitri and I talked it over. There wasn't much emotion involved. We weren't exactly the type to get sentimental or weepy. We both came from cultures where men didn't cry or talk about their feelings. Dmitri did his best to comfort me in his blunt way. "Tonight is your birthday," he said. "We're going out. We'll find you someone better. Honestly, I never liked her anyway. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention it was my birthday?" Dmitri and I grabbed breakfast, though I was still feeling the effects of the night before. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with texts and calls from Megan. I finally responded, telling her I'd seen everything on her phone and couldn't even stand to talk to her. She kept begging to come to my birthday party, but I flat out refused. I think Megan was more worried about how she looked than about saving our relationship. Her entire social status was tied to being with me, and if I acted single at my birthday party while she wasn't there, everyone would know something was wrong. Deep down, I think she was terrified of being embarrassed more than anything else. The rest of the day is a blur. One of my friends mailed me a birthday package from California packed with some high-quality weed, hash, moon rocks, pills, and even a little cocaine. I dove headfirst into all of it, determined to numb the pain. One clear memory from that night stands out. At the pregame, I was sitting in my chair, flanked by 2 girls perched on the armrests. Someone snapped a picture, and I still have it to this day. I was wearing sunglasses and had that classic drunk grin, trying to look like I didn't have a care in the world. But when I look at that photo now, I can see the hurt hiding behind the smile. We had a few tables reserved at one of the hottest nightclubs downtown, and I was surrounded by booze and substances all night. In that moment, the only thing that made me feel okay was being completely out of my mind. I had my sunglasses on, sporting that classic, carefree grin, the kind that only comes with being completely loaded. But if you look closely at that photo, you can see the truth. I was hiding a mountain of pain. Sitting there on that chair, the cocktail of substances began to take hold. It was the first time I used anything not to party, but to numb myself, to make me feel something resembling normal. I remember the thought that crossed my mind so vividly. I want to feel like this forever. I never want to hurt like that again. With weed, booze, and everything else, I felt like I was finally in control, like no one could touch me emotionally anymore. Oh, how ironic that thought would turn out to be years later. I told my teammates and friends that Megan and I were done. When they asked why she wasn't at my party, I didn't explain. I kept my cool and played it off like it was no big deal. I tried to steer the conversation back to the celebration and acted like I wasn't affected by any of it. The revenge begins. This isn't one of those carefully orchestrated revenge plots. It was more like a messy, half-baked plan that evolved as I went. I knew I wanted to hurt Megan the way she had hurt me, but I mostly just improvised, taking opportunities as they came. Something inside me had snapped that night on the chair. My once kind and forgiving nature was gone. All the morals I prided myself on? They vanished. I'd never cheated in a relationship before, and I stupidly believed that meant I'd never be cheated on. But now I realized how naive I'd been. From that moment on, I didn't care about collateral damage. My only goal was to hurt Megan as much as possible, no matter the cost. The following week, while scrolling through Facebook, I came across the profile of one of Megan's track teammates. That's when my first revenge idea hit me. If Megan had been hiding conversations with my teammates, I was going to flip the script and see how many people close to her I could hook up with. Lucky for me, the women's track team was way bigger than the men's basketball team, and, let's be honest, way better looking too. The teammate whose profile I stumbled on happened to have a boyfriend. But in my broken state, I thought, well, everyone cheats anyway. Let's find out if she does too. So, I kicked off the classic flirty social media game. I liked a few of her photos, she liked a few of mine, I slid into her messages, and bam, a week later she was in my bed. That worked so well that I decided to try the same approach with a few more of Megan's teammates, specifically her 4x400 relay squad. Out of the 3 teammates I ended up hooking up with, 2 of them had boyfriends, and they still cheated with me. That left me with some very mixed emotions. On one hand, it fed my bruised ego and made me feel powerful again. On the other hand, it also left me bitter and sad, cementing my new, cynical belief that loyalty was a joke. I found myself spiraling into the mindset of all women cheat. None of them are loyal. This is the classic tale of fighting monsters and becoming one yourself. My newfound strategy became my go-to. In my twisted logic, it achieved 2 things. It exposed who was willing to cheat, which meant the fallout when everything came to light would be even more chaotic. It reassured me that Megan's betrayal wasn't because of something I did, it was because women were the problem. Yeah, I know how messed up that sounds. But back then, it made sense to me. I started collecting small items from every girl I hooked up with: bras, panties, jewelry, anything they left behind. It wasn't for some creepy reason. It was part of my growing plan. Sometimes I didn't even need to try. One girl left a pair of distinct shoes behind. I knew Megan would recognize them immediately. They belonged to the girl her ex had rebounded with after their breakup. That alone drove Megan crazy, since the girl was one of her friends. The fact that I now slept with her too? That was going to send Megan over the edge. I made an extra effort to collect items that I knew Megan would recognize, things like a team sweater with one of her track teammates' names on it. over time, I gathered quite a collection. By the end of a couple of months, I had accumulated a stash of bras, panties, jewelry, and other belongings from the various girls I had been with, including her teammates. The first explosion of drama came when one of Megan's teammates' boyfriends found out she had been cheating with me. That single revelation snowballed into a massive chain reaction, exposing not only her but several of her teammates. It wasn't long before everyone started finding out about each other's betrayals. The fallout was so intense that even their coaches had to get involved to try to contain the chaos. The drama was on another level, and it made me feel like I had all the power in the world. I know it sounds evil, but at the time, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I had fallen in love with the destruction I was causing. Adding to the poetic timing, that same week, the athletics PR department plastered massive posters of me all over campus to promote our next game. They were everywhere, on bulletin boards, buildings, even entire walls. Megan and her friends couldn't avoid my face no matter where they went, all while this storm of drama was unfolding around them. I felt like some kind of victorious dictator. It was both glorious and pathetic, and I reveled in it. Their track coach, who was clearly at her wits' end, eventually tried to escalate things by complaining to the compliance department and my team's coaches. My coaches, however, didn't take her seriously. They laughed it off and told her, "This seems like an internal issue. He hasn't broken any rules, so there's nothing we can do." This only made her angrier. The women's track team started falling apart under the pressure. Their national ranking tanked, and the tension boiled over when Megan's coach was caught ripping down some of the smaller posters of me around campus in a fit of rage. Knowing that my face was literally driving them crazy was the cherry on top. To keep the fire burning, I doubled down on social media. I posted smiling photos with other girls, always looking like I was having the time of my life. To everyone on the outside, I appeared carefree and happy, but deep down, I was bitter and broken. I'd fully embraced this new mindset and forgotten the naive, kind-hearted person I used to be. I hated the old version of myself for letting Megan emasculate me, and I sank deeper into self-pity. Looking back, it's depressing how lost I was. But no one around me could tell. I wore the mask of the cool guy flawlessly. Things escalated when a girl from another sports team claimed she was pregnant with my child. I had pretended to like her, just like I had with all the others, and then moved on immediately after sleeping with her. Long story short, she wasn't actually pregnant, but the rumor spread fast. The publicity from that rumor only dug the knife deeper into Megan's side. Eventually, I decided it was time to make my final move. I gathered everything I had collected, 8 or 9 items from different girls, including her teammates, and stuffed them into big black trash bags, along with some of Megan's belongings. I drove to her house, left the bags on her front porch, and called her dad. I let him know her things were there and asked him to tell his demon daughter. Megan's dad and I had always gotten along well. He even took my side initially after we broke up. But after all these events, I'm pretty sure his opinion of me shifted drastically. About 15 minutes later, Megan called me. I answered the phone, fully prepared for her reaction, and it didn't disappoint. She was sobbing hysterically, that half-crying, half-gasping sound people make when they're completely overwhelmed. She wasn't even mad, just desperate, begging me to stop. Her pain only fueled me. I smiled to myself as I listened and said, "Why were there other guys in our relationship, Megan? You mixed them in, so I mixed in other girls' stuff with yours. It's the perfect metaphor, don't you think?" At the time, I thought it sounded clever and dramatic, and I was way too proud of myself. Now I cringe just thinking about it. What a facepalm moment. Later, one of Megan's friends, who had known about her cheating all along, told me Megan had been convinced I was the one cheating on her the whole time. Apparently, her reasoning was that I was constantly out of town. The logic doesn't hold up at all, considering I was gone for basketball games, a schedule you could literally find posted on the school's website. I always kept in touch with her when I could, though practice and meetings meant I couldn't always be on my phone. Looking back, I think that was just a flimsy excuse she used to cover her insecurities and save face with the people who knew what she'd done. Months passed, and Megan returned to campus after taking a medical leave. We ran into each other at the physical therapy center in the athletic facility. I saw this as yet another chance to hurt her. It had been a while since my last act of revenge, and I realized I was still hungry for more. This time, I decided to act like I wanted to reconcile. At first, Megan was cautious, but after some convincing, she took the bait. Within a week, we were back to mending our relationship. For about a month, we went through the motions, but I wouldn't even call it a relationship. I set strict rules: no male friends, no partying with her girlfriends, and I demanded full access to her accounts and location at all times. It was less a relationship and more of a hostage situation, but I didn't care. Having that level of control gave me a twisted sense of power. Meanwhile, I wasn't faithful to her at all. That had been the plan from the start. Eventually, Megan found out I'd slept with a girl from one of her classes. When she confronted me, I told her, "Now you know exactly how it felt to be me." Our breakup was messy, and I felt triumphant yet again. It was just another opportunity to hurt her, and I'd succeeded. After that, we didn't speak for years. I graduated and moved to Central America, trying to escape my old life. About a year into living abroad, 2 years after our last conversation, Megan reached out to me. By this point, I was a mess. My life revolved around heavy substance abuse and questionable activities. I was deep into illegal and immoral behavior, yet I blamed Megan for the dark person I'd become. I refused to take any responsibility for the choices that led me there. I hadn't had a real relationship since Megan, mostly because I couldn't bring myself to trust another woman. Even after years had gone by, her message reignited my anger. Instead of seeing it as a chance for closure, I saw it as yet another opportunity to hurt her. We started talking as friends, but our conversations grew flirty over Facebook Messenger. There were literal oceans and countries separating us, but that didn't matter. I saw my opening and decided to take it. At the time, I was planning a trip back to visit some friends at my old university. I lied to Megan, telling her I was moving back for a new job. She was finishing her last year at school, and we made plans to meet up when I moved back. When I returned to the States, we met at a coffee shop. We spent the whole night together, and from her perspective, it seemed like we had finally moved past the pain of our past. She believed we had a real shot at rebuilding what we once had. But the truth was, I wasn't staying. I was only in town for 2 days, and I never told her that. We hooked up a few times during those 2 days, and when it was time for me to leave, I packed my things, boarded a plane back to Central America, and blocked her on every platform. This time, I didn't get to witness the aftermath. I could only imagine what Megan went through when she realized I had lied about everything. She thought I had returned for good, ready to give us another try, only to have me disappear without a word. But unlike my earlier acts of revenge, this one didn't feel satisfying. By then, my life was in shambles. My substance abuse spiraled further out of control, and within 3 years, I hit rock bottom. I was hospitalized after years of heavy use and barely survived. From the moment I discovered her cheating to that day in the hospital, I hadn't been sober for a single 24-hour period. Looking back, I can see how much pain I caused Megan, but honestly, I think I did far more damage to myself. I let my bitterness and anger consume me, turning me into someone I barely recognized, a person with no morals or sense of direction. Though I've spent this story detailing my revenge, if there's one thing I wish I'd done differently, it would be spending that energy on healing myself instead. To anyone reading this, if you're dealing with the heartbreak of infidelity, I hope you choose to focus on yourself. Revenge might feel good in the moment, but it won't heal you. It's a separate journey, and it can distract you from the real work of putting yourself back together. Fortunately, I eventually got sober and have been clean for over 4 years now. I even experienced infidelity again with another girlfriend before I got sober. This time, I didn't seek revenge. I focused on healing, and that process was far more satisfying than anything I'd done to Megan. Today, I'm happily married. My wife and I have been together for almost 2 years, and she's also sober. My life now feels like a dream. I have a job I love, a supportive partner, and a future I'm excited for. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I don't normally write like this, and it's the first time I've shared this story in full. Writing it has been a strange but cathartic experience. My hope is that it serves as a cautionary tale about how easy it is to let hurt and revenge consume you, turning you into someone you don't even recognize. We all have dark moments, but I think what happened during that time fundamentally changed who I am. My personality and psyche were never the same after that experience, but I'm grateful I was able to rebuild myself into someone better.